This is Ashley Martinez. I am interviewing George Autobee on November the 6th, 2013. This interview is taking place at University Library, University Archives and Special Collections, 2200 Bonforte Boulevard, Pueblo, Colorado, 81001. This interview is sponsored by the CSU Pueblo University Archives and Special Collections and is a part of the Southern Colorado Ethnic Heritage and Diversity Archives Project. I wanted to confirm that Mr. Autobee understands that this interview is being recorded and that this recording will be preserved at CSU Pueblo University Archives.
Yes, I understand.
Thank you for taking the time to interview with us. And first, we could start off with some biographical questions. So your name, where you're from, and things of your background.
Okay. My name is George, last name Autobee, spelled A-U-T-O-B-E-E. I grew up here in Pueblo. My family's been here for close to 7 generations. We were the first ones to settle here in Pueblo County. I went to Bradford grade school, Risley Junior High, and then graduated from East High in 1967. After that, I worked at Parkview Hospital as an orderly, and then I enlisted in the Marine Corps in '68, January. Was in boot camp in San Diego, California, January 9th, and ended up in the Marine Corps and ended up in Vietnam in July of 1968. But again, prior to that, I was, again, born here in Pueblo, grew up here, went to all the local schools here, and how would you say it, Pueblo native, you know.
So why did you join the Marines? Was it a family thing or is it something you did on your own? Can you explain a little bit about your decision on joining the military?
I had several cousins that were in the military prior to me getting in. One was a medic in the Army, and I had like 6 other cousins that were in the Marine Corps. And I was looking to be in the military ever since I was young. My dad served in the Second World War, and towards the latter part of the war. We had Andrew Autobee, who served in First World War, and then my ancestors were in the Indian Wars and in the Mexican-American War also. So we have close to 7 generations in the military.
So you obviously enlisted.
Yeah, I enlisted, and seeing that probably the Marine Corps, if I was going to go into combat, I wanted to know how to fight. And Marine Corps was the one that I thought was the one that would be the best to be involved with in reference to any type of activity.
Okay, and so after you enlisted, what was the next process? Can you go through the process of after signing your name away, what kind of things
Sure.
that you go through? And
Okay, well, first thing they do is they send you up to Denver, and you go through the customs house up there, and there's where they swear you in. And you get sworn in. They tell you to have your bags ready to go. Soon after you're sworn in, then they take you to the air base. At that time it was Stapleton. And they flew us from Denver to San Diego, California. It's the first time I ever flew in a plane. I got there in San Diego, California about midnight, and it was insane after that. They have a way of keeping you in shock for at least 2 days before you get so numb you can't feel anything any after a while. They keep you going. At midnight you get there, you got yellow footprints that you put your feet on. You do not move, you do not talk unless you're instructed to, and you wait for the person in front of you to move and you follow them. They get you with all your clothes and everything. They take you into the billets. They take you for your haircut, and that's when they shave all your hair off. That's kind of astonishing reality that takes place. And then they keep you up for like 36 hours going straight. All the basics which you're supposed to do in boot camp. And then you finally get to go to sleep. Well, that next morning all holy hell breaks loose. They come in and they start throwing people off their beds, pulling down what do they call it when you have two beds, bunk beds, tearing the bunk bed down, pulling the mattresses out. And it's all to shock you to see if you can handle what's going on. Because if you say anything or do anything, then they focus in on you. and you're the one they're going to make an example out of. Because if you can't handle it, they will take care of it real quick. And after that, you're instructed in small arms, you're instructed in self-defense, you're instructed in jungle warfare. You spend 6 months training. After that, you get out, you go home for 30 days, go back, and by then they give you what your specialty is. And it could be combat arms, it could be armored detachment, it could be artillery, intelligence. When you go back, they send you to a special school called ITR. And at ITRs, what they do is it's their specialty. And my specialty was 60 mortars, 60 mics. It's a small tube that you put rockets in and it shoots it out. And then infantry, because all Marines are infantry. Everybody has the 0311 MOS. So you go to ITR and you trade in your specialty. And then after ITR, they line you up and get you ready for overseas duty. And then you depart. We departed to California, midnight, got into Hawaii. All my great thoughts of being in Hawaii. I thought we were going to see Hawaii, okay? Join the Marine Corps and see the world. The only thing we seen was a room like this one. The MPs at the door that said, we didn't want you guys taken off before you go to Vietnam. So the only thing we seen in Hawaii was four walls. They loaded us back up, and then we were got into Da Nang. In Da Nang is where they separated us and put us in our specific units. And
What year was that?
that was 68, June 68 when I got to Da Nang. Irony was, when we first got there, a couple of guys come walking up to us, and these guys were hurting. I mean, they were skinny, they were pale, eyes were all bloodshot. And they said, you guys are all going to die. You're all walking dead men. And I looked at him and said, oh, no, not me. You know, I'm not going to die here. Well, little did I know that before my tour was out, I'd be saying the same thing that those guys were saying to the new guys coming in. You guys are walking dead men. You ain't going to make it, because this place is going to take your life or take your sanity, one of the two. And it was all real ironic, because I never thought I'd be like one of those guys, but I ended up being just like one of them, telling people the truth. I mean, it was a waste. So after we got to our unit, then we were broken up into platoons, and then immediately moved out. We were out in the jungle. The only time we came back from the jungle was when we went to our fire bases to rearmor and get more ammunition and food, but that was about it. So I spent close to 10 months in the jungle. When I got wounded the first time, they kept me in the hospital for 30 days, recovered, and then they sent me back in to the jungle. And then I got wounded the second time. That one they sent me home. But during that whole period, I mean, you have a thought of what you think may be happening or going to happen to you, but when you get there, it's not even close. I mean, these war films cannot even come close to depicting a lot of the stuff that you go through, because you're seeing it from the first person perspective. It's not a movie. But in a way, it's like a movie, though, because you see yourself as an actor and doing all this stuff. But in the movies, you know, guy gets hurt and they get up and walk away later on. You know, they don't die. But when they're dead and wounded in front of you, people that you know very close, it takes on a whole different reality. Yeah, it's no movie can ever give you that feeling. No way. Yeah, so in combat for 10 months, my unit was called, it was 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division. My unit was Mike Company. And Mike Company, it was M for, because you had Lima for Al, Mike Company, and they called us Medevac Mike because we had so many casualties. In my platoon, 1st platoon, when I was first there, everybody was either killed or wounded. Yeah, in my platoon. Nobody came out of there unscathed. And that was in the rifle platoon. When I went into the mortar platoon, all of them ended up with Purple Hearts. They were wounded, and none of them were killed in the mortar platoon. But when I was there, they said later on they got a few KIAs. But I think the biggest thing was every night having to go out on an ambush. I mean, it really wears on you. At first, you get there, and really you think you're a hot soldier. Nothing can hurt you. And then when you get wounded, you find out that you're human. And then you got to go back on an ambush. And it's like night after night. There are no weekends. It's just constant until you're wounded or too hurt to do anything, or you go nuts. That's the only way you get out of the field, okay? Until your tour is over. And the Marine Corps was 13 months. So guys are taken to their own reality of how to deal with it. And I've seen guys shoot themselves to get out of combat. I've seen guys just throw their guns down and say, I ain't fighting no more. You can do what you want. I'm not gonna fight no more. And you're there saying, man, I wish I had the guts to do that, because it took more guts to do that than it did to follow your orders to go out into combat sometimes. You know, and you would go out there so scared, and stuff would happen, and you would try to rationalize and deal with it. But sometimes you'd get so scared, it was even hard to move your legs. I mean, you know when you have dreams, you're trying to run away. It's the same thing, except this is real. I mean, it's no dream, it's for real happening. So the combat was something else. And what happens is, first 30 days, maybe first 60 days, your body can deal with it, okay? You get that adrenaline rush, especially when those bullets start flying by. It's like, whoa, you get this rush that you would not believe. They compare it to a hit of heroin, almost, in the rush that you get from combat. Guys get addicted to that. They actually get addicted to the rush they get in combat. After 60 days, what happens is the hippocampus part of the brain starts to shrink because it's getting too much adrenaline. And what happens, you start to numb out, literally numb out. It's hard to hear people, it's hard. You're just like always in the gaze, staring out. Things don't hit you anymore. They're not, because you're numb. You actually, your body, your mind starts to numb you out so that it can repair the damage that has taken place. And your hippocampus brain, part of the brain, actually starts to shrink. So even though a veteran may come back from combat and they may not have lost an arm or a leg, they lost a part of themselves, part of that reality. Hippocampus deals with your memory, short-term memory. It deals with your emotions. And it's a part of the brain that's very, what they call primal to our reality. So a lot of emotions. It's hard to control your emotions because you get so angry, and what happens, you got short fuse. And part of your post-traumatic stress is learning how to look at those red flags that come up and how to deal with that in a positive way. But after going through that type of trauma in combat, and these poor guys coming back now that have done 4 or 5 tours, I don't know how they can be functional. Because I tell you what, I just did 1 tour, but I got sent back after I got wounded. And going back was the hardest thing I ever did. I mean, I knew I was going to die. So when you know you're going to die, it's kind of like you got a whole different reality on how you're going to deal with what's going on a day-to-day basis. And so you come back to this reality, and it's like, whoa, you can't make the connection because you're living on a day-to-day reality of life and death, and you come back here, and everybody's happy. You know, there's no seriousness. It's like lackadaisical. Nobody's taking it real serious. And that's one of the things I had hard dealing with when I came back, is people were just so lackadaisical. And I was serious because I had come from a serious situation. And that still impacts me till today. Oh yeah. Yeah, I cannot handle people who do not take life serious because they're wasting it. And you see so many people who I served with that they wish they could have been around to enjoy life, but they weren't. So in lieu of that, I really become very critical when people don't do what they're supposed to be doing to help get their life to a higher level, enhance their life and the people around them too. I think that's one of my, what we call character flaws.
Were you diagnosed with PTSD?
We didn't know what it was. It wasn't until 1968, before it was called shell shock. But that's when the guy was in the corner, full of meds, and all baboso, dysfunctional, unable to communicate, shell shock. I mean, the shell shock is where you've been under constant bombardment, brain trauma taking place, all these different things, post-traumatic stress, and they withdraw, close everything out. Okay, that's how to deal with the reality. Post-traumatic stress in '86 is where the military and the government and the mental health reality, they recognized post-traumatic stress as being a mental health issue. So I didn't get diagnosed with it until about 1988. And then I started putting my paperwork together for seeking compensation for the military for medical help, plus for compensation for treatment for post-traumatic stress. Yeah.
And how do you suffer with PTSD to today?
Oh, till today? I don't know if this is PTSD. I think it's a part of it. Is gunfire, backfire. I'll hear a car or truck backfire. I hear a loud explosion. 4th of July. I'm on the ground and I'm pulling people down with me. And it's what they call stimulus and response. What happens is it's muscle memory. You no longer, the sound no longer goes to your brain. It goes directly to your muscle, and your muscles react before you can even think about it. Okay, that's survival skill. Something goes off, you hit the ground right away, then you look around and see what's going on. Post-traumatic stress, my anger. I had to learn how to control my anger. Names of people. It's hard for me to remember names of people because in combat, people were coming in, and you start to learn who their names were and their girlfriend and where they grew up, and then they're dead the next day. You can do it 2 or 3 times, but after that you can't do it no more, because a part of you dies with every person that dies, a little bit of you, because you became involved with them. You got to know who they were, you got to know their name, you started pull out the liquor and you started to drink a little bit, and they're dead the next day. I mean, you can't handle it. There's no way, because it was just too many people dying. So you close it off. You don't want to know the new people. You don't care to know them because you know they're going to be dead. So so I carry that still to today. It's hard for me to really get a close relationship with people because of that reality that I still try to deal with, very much so. And the other part's post-traumatic stress is, I was lucky when I came back. I found a focus, okay, with the Chicano movement. If you find a focus, you can go proactive. If you don't, it'll eat you up. So I try to talk to a lot of these veterans. When they come back, there's nobody going to be telling you to show up for formation. There's not going to be nobody to punish you if you don't show up for class. So you got to self-discipline. And on the other side with camaraderie, because camaraderie is one of the biggest things in the military. Your friends, okay, is to try to have them develop relationships here on campus with other veterans that they have a common denominator they can share with each other. So those were activities that I try to share with other veterans to be able to use those tools to help them to make it through the system. Because if not, it becomes overwhelming. If you don't have that focus, it's too much hitting you. So you got to narrow it down so it's something that you can see, real for yourself, you know.
So what were the race relationships like in the war, in combat, in your platoon?
Let's see, okay. Race relationships, boot camp, it wasn't bad. Yeah, it was okay. It's when we got into combat, and we got, not in combat itself, but in the rear areas. We were so much in the jungle all the time, it really didn't affect us too much. When we got to the rear, though, you had the guys with the Confederate flags from down south, then you had the black Muslims, and we seen some stuff happen, boy. I mean, a lot of hatred place in the rear areas, a lot of hatred. And
would you mind expanding on a little bit on what you saw?
Oh, yeah, well, like I said, there was one time we seen guys had a Confederate flag up there. The blacks just went nuts, and they just went over there and pulled it down, and they started beating everybody up that was there. Oh, I said, okay. And then we were in Okinawa, and they had a race riot there. The blacks, I don't know what keyed it off, but that night was a long night. I mean, they were going to all the billets and busting open the doors and dragging people out and beating them up. They couldn't get into our billet. Our billet was all nothing but Puerto Ricans and Chicanos, and these guys had been around for a while. So we were pretty well protected. But everybody else, boy, it got pretty intense. And then I was supposed to go to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, after I got back from Vietnam. And I was able to get an early out. I got an early discharge. But the week I was supposed to report there, they had a big race riot in Camp Lejeune, huge one. One time when I was in combat, they asked me, one time I had to go back to the hospital, and they asked me to deliver mail to the guys that were in the unit, but now they were in a detention center, a stockade. So I got the mail, took it over to them, and I look up, and it's all the guys in my unit that I knew, all the blacks. And what you guys doing here? And they said, "This, the hell with this war, we ain't fighting it no more." They had just killed Martin Luther King. They said, "We ain't fighting no more." And about a month later, they had a big riot there too. It was pretty intense. But yeah, it got pretty intense. You became very aware of what was going on with racial issues. Very intense.
How did you stay in touch with your family back home? What were the forms of communication?
Writing. One couple of times I got to call. They had a shortwave radio we could pick up in Da Nang and call home, but you start talking to them, and all of a sudden everything, all the distortion would take place, and you couldn't understand what they were saying. But I got to Australia, and I was able to make a landline call direct. So it was mostly writing, though. We wrote letters, a lot of letters.
So the 10 months, you said you were 10 months in combat. Did you have any lay down time, anything that you did while you were not on duty?
Well, they would send us on R&R, rest and relaxation. So I got to go to Da Nang for 4 days for R&R, and then I got to go to Sydney, Australia for 7 days for R&R.
And what would you do?
Everything and anything you could while you had the time. Because you figured, to me, I knew I was going to die when I got back from Australia. So you try to pack in a whole lifetime in 7 days. You really try. Yeah.
What were your emotions towards the combat, besides fear and?
It was insane. It was insane. I mean, there was no reason for us. Well, after a while, you found out that the Vietnamese were damn good soldiers. Okay, damn good soldiers, and the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, they had been fighting for generations. Okay. You come to a realization. After I got wounded, we had a couple of POWs that they had captured, and I'm jumping in the helicopter. I had gotten wounded, and I jump in the helicopter, and I look up, and right behind me are two POWs, but I didn't know they were POWs. they were NVA, and they were about as big as me. Okay, but they had their hands tied. So I said, "Whoa!" And they had a guard with them, because when I looked back, I thought they had caught up with me. So I sat down, and I sat across from them. And that trip from the field back to the hospital, I realized we were going to lose the war, because I seen their reality. I seen their they call it intestinal fortitude. They knew what they were fighting for. I didn't. So I knew at that time, I said, we're going to lose this war. And sure enough, we lost the war. And it was because they were not going to quit. They were going to fight us for another 20 years, 100 years if they had to, but they weren't going to quit. So that convinced me right there that it's the wrong place, wrong time. Yeah.
Do you still keep in touch with the guys in your platoon? You still have relationships with them? How many, or if any?
Irony that you said that. 6 months ago, one of the guys got a hold of me. I hadn't communicated with any of the others. I left with a lot of hostility when I got out of there, because they wanted me not to leave. They wanted me to get rid of my second Purple Heart and stay there, and I wouldn't do it. So they got all mad at me because they thought I was running out on them. So I didn't really have any communication with them. But one of the guys I had a good relationship with. What had happened is that he had. I didn't have them with me. Aviator glasses. I had a pair of aviator glasses that I gave him, and him and I I only knew him for like maybe 15 days, but those 15 days were the worst 15 days we were in combat in Vietnam. And he got a hold of me, of all places, on Facebook 40 years later. We're on Facebook, and he says, "Is this George Autobee, served in the Marine Corps?" He says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, this is Bill." And he told me his last name. I said, "Man, I've been looking for you for 40 years. I says, "You still got my glasses?" He retired from the FBI. And what we're hoping to do is meet up here the next few years. He's in Texas right now. But I sent him my story. I did my story on Vietnam, and I sent it to him. And he only knew me for a few days, but those few days in my story is about 2-3 pages long. So he was there, and he's seen what happened. But he, like with a lot of veterans, memories of what took place get mixed up. So I wanted to make sure I had my memories correct, so I had him look at it. And him and my second lieutenant, when I got first wounded the first time, we made a contact through the internet also. And those are the only two people after all this time I've ever had any communication with. Yeah.
And why were they upset that you left?
I told them the war sucked, man. It's bull, man. I says, you want me to give up my second Purple Heart so I can go back out on ambush with you tonight? I says, you guys are crazy, man. I says, I've already got my Purple Heart, 2 Purple Hearts. I says, I got my ticket punched. I says, you guys go get yours. I says, I'm not gonna die here. My war's over. Because when I got hit that second time, I was so happy. I was so happy because I knew I had beat the system. I had won because I knew I was going home. So.
Can you talk a little bit about your injuries, or do you mind?
Sure. No. First time I caught a AK-47 round in ambush in the right arm, and that was August 9th, 1968. I was walking point and seen the bullets hit in front of me, and the last bullet caught my arm, and my rifle was in my arm, and when it hit me, my rifle went flying in the air, spun me around, I landed on my back, and I says, oh man, this is it. This is how I'm going to die, okay? All I could see was bullets flying over me. They were hitting the trees and the leaves were raining down on me. I'm going, whoa, man, get no closer than this. Yeah. That was the first time. They drugged me out and got me to a hospital. The second time was shrapnel from a booby trap. We were on patrol. There's a guy that stepped on a booby trap. He was like about 18 guys in front of me, and we were separated like about maybe 5 to 7 feet away from each other. So I felt something hit me in the head like a rock, and then the next thing I did, I felt the explosion, the concussion. And because you'll feel it before you hear it, and knocked me on the ground. I started feeling my head, and I felt the blood, and I says, I'm going home. I says, I'm going home. I made it, you know. I looked around, and that's when I gave my partner the sunglasses, and I said, man, I don't need these anymore. These are yours. And so I gave him the sunglasses. I had a canteen full of gin and a canteen full of grapefruit juice. And I says, gentlemen, let's have a drink. Gave everything away. I gave him all my stuff, and got on board the helicopter and went to the hospital. Came back after 30 days. The unit was getting ready to pull out that night, and they gave me the offer to turn down my second Purple Heart, and I says, no way. I said, I'm going home. So they were fairly upset with that.
Did you know how the rest of America felt about the Vietnam War?
Not really. We didn't get very much news. I mean, you're out in the jungle, man. You don't get no news. We listen to the radio every once in a while, but they wouldn't tell you very much. Yeah. And there was no newspapers. I mean, they had one newspaper there, but it was Armed Forces newspaper, which they didn't say hardly anything. That's if you got a chance to read it. Yeah. Most of the time, you got it in the letters. They'd send you an article or something from home. But you really did. I mean, it didn't matter. You were there. You had to do what you had to do to stay alive. Didn't matter what was going on over here.
And what started to change your mind about the war? When did you know that it wasn't something that you wanted to fight for?
When those 2 POWs, when I found out you face your enemy, and they were very good, and I knew that there was no way we were going to win this war. And that was in August, and I had to stay there until March. I had to get wounded another time before I could even get out of there, because I just couldn't put my rifle down and say no more. That's my family's history. I mean, how do you tell your parents, you know, you're not going to fight no more after you've committed yourself? Your whole family history of 7 generations in the military. It's, you do it because you don't want to lose face. You don't want your family to lose face. And if it costs your life, that's so be it. But that's what you signed the paper. You gave your word. But after a while, you realize it was a waste, a true waste of humanity. And what we did to those people was war crime. A war crime, what we did. Yeah. They didn't come attack us, we went attack them. They didn't.
If you had a second chance to do it all over again, would you change it?
Oh man, I keep getting asked that question. I wouldn't change the experience for $1 million because I learned. But to go through that insanity again, no, if I could avoid it, hell yeah, I'd avoid it. Because it was just true mass insanity. Bunch of crazy people and everybody had guns. You can't get no crazier than that.
So I've read that a lot of the Chicano veterans, when they would look into who they were fighting, they saw a lot of their own people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you experience that?
Yeah. It was our, like they say, I think Charlie Trujillo said, it was our farm workers fighting their farm workers. It was a poor man's war. People were there on the front lines were poor Chicanos, poor whites, poor blacks, Puerto Ricans. It was the poor people that were fighting. It was, they were the ones in the front lines. We were the ones that were, because you could tell how many, there was none of them college educated, none of our troops except from officer corps. But everybody else was working, came from the working class, or if they're lucky. But yeah, Chicanos, a lot of Chicanos. Again, everybody had their own perspective on how to deal with the war. People dealt with it differently. Chicanos dealt with it differently than anybody else, than a lot of other people. We had the highest ratio of people being killed, Chicanos being killed in combat, because we ended up joining Special Forces in the Marine Corps and the SEALs. We had a higher, just like in the last war, we had a higher percentage of our people in the combat arms than anybody else. And that comes back to the macho reality in our community. Still very prevalent, very strong. Well, yeah.
What stood out to you most about combat? What was one thing that you will never forget?
You can die real quick. You don't know what you're doing. You walk in there rum dum. You die real fast. You learn survival skills. You know, you actually, in a way, you turn into an animal because all your senses are heightened, especially when you go on an ambush at night. Sense of smell, your night vision, your hearing, everything's taken to a higher level. Okay, all your senses are taken to a higher level, and you become more. How would you say it? Combat. The term that you would use is you become an old war dog. You know, you've been there, you've seen it, and you get used to it after a while. And then after a while, it doesn't faze you. Crazy things can happen. You look at it, no big deal. You get very callous, very cold. You know, and you got to gain that humanity back when you come back. If not, you lose it for the rest of your life. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it.
How did your family deal with you being in the war?
I'm still assessing that. My mom's still angry for me for going. Still angry. This is what, 40 years later, 50 years later. She said, you should have never gone. You owed it to stay here and take care of me. Okay. But the rest, I mean, it was when I came back is when it went nuts, because I came back to as a different person. You don't come back the same. There's no way you can come back the same. And so my realities, again, dealing with post-traumatic stress when you didn't know what it was. You had all these other realities taking place. And people not knowing. I mean, they didn't know what the heck was going on. And so when I joined the anti-war movement, my dad was working at the Army depot. So he caught holy hell from all his coworkers, you know. So I got to respect him for him taking it on. He never said anything, but I know he did.
Is there any last comments you want to make about the war and your
It,
experience
yeah,
with
it took a lot out of everybody, and for them to continue wars like Iraq, what they did, putting these soldiers out on the line like that and then sending them back over and over. If they're going to do something like that, they got to have a draft. Everybody's got to participate. You just can't have one section of society participating in that reality. And if you're going to commit your troops, you better know that what you're doing is not just an off-the-wall gesture. It has to, you're committing people that are going to die, and that death is going to have an impact on many people. And if not death, paralyzed, shot up so bad that you're dysfunctional. You know, you can't. You lose your arms, you lose your leg. You try to come through that reality and become proactive. It's, I mean, we're paying big time for the veterans' benefits for these veterans that suffer from post-traumatic stress and suffer from the injuries. We're going to be paying. Government will be paying until these people are in their 80s and 90s, and that's the war debt. And they're not willing to pay for it, then the whole economy goes to hell. And this is what happened when the economy went to hell, because they refused to pay for the Afghan war and the Iraq war. They didn't want to raise the taxes, so everything goes to hell after that. So everybody's got to ante up, not only the civilians in paying taxes, but also in being drafted to get involved in these wars. They got to share like everybody else. If there's going to be blood spilt, we got to all share it, not just one section of society. Make sense?
A lot of it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate this interview.